Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Backlog Banter. We're here. We're back. The boys. We're back for another normal video, and this is it. Nintendo has done stuff in 2020, and we're gonna talk about what they did. Just sort of give them a little bit of a report card of how they did over the past, well, not full 12 months, but close. And just go through the list of everything that happened, and see if it actually ended up good or not. Because we've had some ups and downs over the course of BLB, where we're like, Nintendo 2020 sucks dick. And then I think we made another video where you were like, the 2020 is fantastic. So where do we come down on the end of the year?
Now, to eliminate the vagary from your introduction, what we're doing is reviewing Nintendo's 2020.
That's right. I fucking
what we're
said,
doing.
I got that across.
Yeah, you said that. You said, yes, things of
Yeah.
that nature.
See
Yeah,
how
so
they did. I think those terms reflect the content
Sure.
of the video. Yeah,
That's fair. And
it wasn't false advertising.
you weren't false. You weren't
No,
Project
Project
Red
Red.
all of us. Oh, get it! Fucking slammed them, nailed them. One of
Yeah.
my favorite games of the year, Cyberpunk 2020. Don't tell
2020.
anybody.
Fuck you. All right, Nintendo.
Okay, Tucker. Nintendo's 2020 has been unlike a year in modern Nintendo history that I can think of.
Mhm.
And I mean that for a couple different reasons, but I think the number one thing that I mean when I say that is that the quality of the year has fluctuated sometimes on a monthly basis.
Yes.
It's
Sometimes
and
within a month.
sometimes within a month. And,
Yeah.
and I think honestly, if you would be much obliged, I think
I'll
where we should
oblige.
start is the overall construction of the year and the fact that Nintendo really was not talking to the audience for much of it.
Yeah. And I think that's what we initially came down on when we were saying their 2020 sucked, is that we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And they decided to pull a 180 and start communicating. Some might say a little bit too much on certain things. But they did start inundating us with trailers and all sorts of stuff, but on a very shortened scale.
I have to say, I think that in the broadest sense, what Nintendo did, in my opinion, smartly, was move away from traditional direct format. I personally don't think we're going to get traditional directs again. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that because what they did is communicate information less consistently, which was problematic, but more pointedly. I wrote about this a little while ago. I think that directs fundamentally have a lot of issues, expectations, and the fact that it obfuscates a lot of important content.
Sure.
You'll get really interesting announcements that get absolutely buried as people like myself wait for the next first party announcement.
Sure.
So what I liked about Nintendo's communication in 2020 is that they allowed everything to breathe and allowed everything to actually have a moment and show that the Switch's ecosystem is actually pretty robust, especially in comparison to where we were on Wii U. So having the Nindy Directs and having a Monster Hunter Direct and then having those first party, things like the Mario 35 Direct. I think that it was smart.
Well, I think, of course, the main crux of it is the Nintendo Partner Showcases, which they started this year.
Partner Showcases,
yes,
of course. And I think having all of those were great. The problem is that I think Nintendo needs to pivot them onto a schedule that is more predictable. And you can't be like, you know what? Every third Thursday of a month, we're announcing a new update for a first party game. What I think you can do is be better about not having us to wake up to a direct just being uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah.
I think if Nintendo can match the cadence and the pace of these announcements with a schedule that actually allows them to not blindside people, then the communication will get really good.
Yeah, I think there's actually a middle ground there, because I do agree with the fucking big boy word. Let me fucking pull up my big boy pants. Obfuscation.
Obfuscation
of the sort of mid-tier content being hidden by announcements like Breath of the Wild 2 or an Animal Crossing or Luigi's Mansion or whatever. I think that is totally valid, and one of the major criticisms I've always had with directs is you look back on them more favorably than you might in the moment, where you realize, okay, there actually was a lot of stuff announced, but you're just thinking of the big stuff. But I do think that there needs to be a middle ground for directs that is first party oriented, which maybe separates it from the third party stuff, has the partner showcases, but hype for something like Age of Calamity, like Origami King. These games were just fucking farted out onto the internet one day. And I think that the fact that their hype cycles were so shortened, I think the fact that they weren't presented in a way that people could, sort of get excited for, did tone down the usual Nintendo hype that we've been so used to over the last few years. I think returning to that in some degree is important to maintain momentum throughout the year.
I want to weasel my way into your point, and of course state my
Okay.
personal bias, which is that the culture of hype in the gaming industry is far more destructive than it is beneficial,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that directs were a major point of unnecessary hype. I have always hated the hype responsibly, don't have expectations so you can't be disappointed type of thing.
Hmm.
But I think Nintendo brings a lot of this onto themselves in the ways that they know what directs mean and then put out a direct that sometimes falls completely flat on its face.
Sure.
I think that Nintendo can communicate information better and manage hype better. I think part of why stepping away from traditional directs is good is because checking expectations is important. And I think that for as fun as Nintendo's hype cycles can be, they get really vitriolic and really toxic. And I think
I
that
don't. I mean, Sword and Shield, but what other games have really had a detrimental hype cycle, especially in the Switch's lifetime?
I'm the concept of directs causes this because on for the week before the direct happens on Twitter, people are shitting on each other for having unrealistic expectations. Then for a week after the direct, half of Nintendo Twitter is like that was the best thing ever, half of it hates it, and both
Sure.
sides are doing this. And I think that sure that's the audience's thing, but Nintendo has community management in a sense that they don't manage their community at all. And I
Hmm.
think that they can set the tempo and set the tone for conversation a little bit better by communicating information in a way that doesn't become such a flashpoint. And I think you can have hype without having unrealistic expectations and all kinds of things. And I think great examples of that were like a Mario 35 Direct or some of the really great partner showcases, like when we saw
Yeah.
Rise or when we saw the Ori games or when we saw all of these things.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a matter of Nintendo, like you said, finding the fucking middle ground there.
Yeah. I think there's a middle ground that they can certainly go through that
Yeah.
both prevents, allows smaller content to be focused on and returns to some of the hype. Because I do think that a lot of the reason that people are overly, not overly, but overall a little down on 2020 is because it did lack a sense of momentum because they just would fucking fart out whatever they wanted. So let's start with that. In the games that came out this year, I have a
Can I
Nintendo.
pincer you really quickly?
You're gonna do it anyway, so let's
I'm
go
gonna
for it.
do it anyway. I know
Yeah.
that's such a fun question because I've already killed your momentum, so
Yes.
there's no point in not agreeing with me.
Uh-huh.
But the reason I want to stop is because I really want to talk about the games. But there's another aspect of Nintendo's communication that I think is really important, and that follows up your point about it feeling like a down year, and makes most sense I think to talk about on the back of how they communicated announcements,
Sure.
and that's how they communicated everything else. I
Hmm.
think that Nintendo has been making objectively disgusting business decisions
Yes.
and market and and adding to that bumbling PR that does not help a situation one iota.
Yeah.
I'll always go back to the July Treehouse Live presentation when they clear as the fucking day is long set up an exciting announcement that looks like a an indie Nintendo crossover. The
Hmm.
replies are full of that. Speculation starts, and then there's a tweet being like, "Yeah, sorry, that's not what we meant." There is an inability of on Nintendo's behalf to communicate information properly, which goes back to the idea of hype being mismanaged.
Hmm.
At the same time, the last couple months of this year have been, and I don't like using the term anti-consumer because people just use it when the leaf is the wrong color on the tree and it's an anti-consumer decision on behalf of fucking Mother Nature. But I think Nintendo, between stopping the Etika charity Joy-Cons from being sold to
Yeah.
shutting down tournaments to their limited time release schedule, these are disgusting decisions that signal a strange change in management that is a far cry from the Iwata era.
Yeah.
Is even a far cry from the Furukawa era. Where is Doug Bowser? Is he to cause for this? We haven't seen him. We don't hear from him.
Yeah.
What's the management over at Nintendo of Japan like right now? Because there are just these decisions being made that feed into the communication problem that really leave me feeling pretty shockingly disappointed in Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important component to talk about before we get into the actual games, which is what I think is pretty obviously the most important
Sure, yeah, of
barometer for a
course.
year's quality. But this is such a strange situation where I feel like Nintendo is being given too many passes. What
Yeah,
they've been pulling recently is unacceptable.
I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, we have a video that is one of our most popular, surprisingly, which is what the fuck is Nintendo doing on March 31st, 2021?
Yeah.
And honestly, we don't really know because there could be something that what we discussed in there that there might be something, but also it's just the end of the fiscal year and they might just be being assholes about it.
Yeah.
And that does not set a good tone going into 21. And that's unfortunate, but also they fucking played themselves. They could have avoided that very easily by not doing what they did.
They need
But
DJ Khaled to be under their desk going, "You played yourself."
yeah,
To keep
it's
them
true.
keep them on track.
Um, but the games did come out. And this is where I think personally, while I am someone who enjoys the hype cycle, who likes the momentum of announcements and communication, this is where I come down on the year being the most disappointing.
Sure.
I picked up a total of 3 games this year from Nintendo.
Okay.
I loved one, liked one, and hated another. And that is not a good track record for me as a Nintendo fan who bought most of the big Switch releases for the last 3 years before this.
Can you step out of the realm of vagary for a second? Because I know what two of those are, but I don't know what the third one is.
I loved Animal Crossing New
Yes.
Horizons. I liked Super Mario 3D All Stars.
Oh, okay.
What did you think it was?
I didn't. That's one I didn't know because you hated Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive
Yeah,
Edition.
and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Fuck, I hate saying that. It was just something I didn't get into, and I felt like I wasted my money. But and that was a significant portion of what Nintendo released this year.
The look here's what's interesting about the 2020 lineup.
Yeah,
What you say that it's a significant portion, but it kind of isn't because on purely a number of titles basis, Nintendo actually put out quite a bit of stuff. But it's the question of scale. They released very few brand new titles of merit.
yes,
Uh, you got your Animal Crossing, you got your Clubhouse, you got your Paper Mario, you got your Age of Calamity.
yes. I
I
think those are
believe
the
that,
4 new releases.
and then you have Mario Kart Live Home Tour, but that's kind of
Sure,
that's percolating on its own, its own sphere. It's
stratosphere.
not even
Yeah,
developed by Nintendo. It's developed by Velen Studios. But those are the 4 big releases, and like you said, you played what? 2 of them? One of them?
one.
You played one of them.
Yes.
So I played all 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And just to talk about those before we balloon out a little bit, I don't think any of them are particularly great other than Clubhouse
Clubhouse
Games.
games. Yeah.
Clubhouse Games, we'll talk about again on my top 20, my top list of 2020. Clubhouse Games, I think, is a lovely package. And it's my favorite game Nintendo released in 2020. I think Animal Crossing is great, but as more time has passed since launch, I think its shortcomings from a quality of life perspective, from a lot of different perspectives, are coming a little bit more clear. It has a cultural impact that is so important and special that I personally believe that it should have won Game of the Year because of what it gave to the industry and the community.
Yeah, sure.
But on the most personal, subjective level, it wasn't New Leaf for me. I think Paper Mario is a deeply and fundamentally flawed experience, and Age of Calamity, the story did not connect with me, and I think that from a technical perspective, from a lot of perspectives, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition is a much stronger game.
Yeah.
So I think the strength of Nintendo's content, not sure how you feel about this, is in what they re-released and reimagined for Switch.
Sure. I think I think that's reasonable considering that there
Yeah.
were 4 big titles and none of them really seemed to hit outside of Animal Crossing
Yeah.
with the wider audience. But even then, I can't say I agree with that.
Sure.
My one caveat on that is 3D All Stars, which of course we thought wasn't real. They came out and I wasn't excited for. Then I ended up playing all 3 of the games and I enjoyed all of them.
Yeah.
Reviews on the channel, but I think the only other one that I even bought was Xenoblade, and that was one that didn't connect with me. I don't think that necessarily has to do anything with the quality of the game or
Yeah.
the remaster or the new content that they added or anything, but just a very personal thing.
Yeah, sure.
So that's another big one. But then I'm just looking at the list that I have Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FV Encore, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX, Pikmin 3 Deluxe, and
See, and see, this is why I think that we're really scraping the bottom of the fucking barrel to look for the silver linings here. But
yeah.
when you look at those games, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, I have not picked up yet. I'm actually planning to with some
Huh.
holiday money and gift cards, just because.
Okay. I'll mail you my fucking copy.
So, well, here's the thing. I want to support it, and I don't physical games banish them from existence, in my opinion. But Kieran, who was my old boss at Nintendo, loves that game, and I talked to him quite extensively, and I'd like to play it. I played it on 3DS for a very little period of time, which is a terrible way to play it.
Yeah.
But that is, by all accounts, from a more objective standpoint, from a lot of people's subjective standpoints, one of the greatest JRPGs in all of Nintendo's library.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's important to note. But at the same time, Pikmin 3 Deluxe is such a special and excellent game. And 3D All Stars, while it's an underwhelming collection as a whole, I do think that this is the best way to play Sunshine and to play Galaxy.
I agree.
Galaxy is a little bit more subjective.
It's 64 as well.
Even 64, if you don't care about the speed running and such, this might be the definitive way to play those 3 games. And for people who haven't gotten to play those before, that's incredible. Those are three.
That's my highlight of the year.
games.
My secondary highlight of the year.
And I think that's totally fair because, like, for me, I had dabbled in Sunshine but never really played it. But I got to complete it this year and absolutely loved it. You know, so that's important and special. And then there's also Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which is allegedly a good game. I bought it for $60 and played it for 45 minutes. And I said, you know what? Maybe this year I'll be better about the games I purchase. I wasn't, but at least I tried. And also Mystery Dungeon, quickly, because you didn't play this one.
No.
I have a lot of personal nostalgia for the rescue games. Blue Rescue Team was my first Pokemon game. My grandma was like, hey, this little dumb Abram kid wants a Pokemon video game. This one says Pokemon and the cover is shiny, so I'll get him this one.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of nostalgia for it, and I think it's actually a well-executed remake. I was able to, full disclosure, play it early. I got an early copy for free. Go to disclose, things of that nature. So I did enjoy playing that quite a bit, but it's one of those things where you felt its age a lot because they didn't really update it mechanically.
Yeah.
But I do think that for people getting to maybe play that for the first time, that's really special. Getting to play the Mario 3D games for the first time is really special. Pikmin 3 Deluxe again. So I think that was the strength of the year, but I kind of play everything Nintendo releases ever on any console. So they weren't super fresh experiences for me for the most part.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I fancy myself a Nintendo fan, believe it or not. I fancy myself, and this is a fucking fact, to have bought most of the games that they've released in especially 2017 and 2018.
Yeah.
So when this gets to a year where half their content is re-releases and even I'm not going for them, I think that scratching the fucking barrel for the silver lining is sort of the thesis of this video.
Yes.
There were other things released. They did a handful of very small titles. There was a Kirby Fighters 2, Mario Bros. 35, Pokemon Cafe Mix, Jump Rope Challenge, and maybe I'm forgetting something else. But
they also published another game I want to pick up called Good Job.
Yeah,
which I've heard by all accounts is really excellent. And I actually
did not get any marketing though.
No, it was stealth released in the one mini direct we got this year, the one traditional mini direct back in March. But what I want to hammer in on for a second is I think the strength of Nintendo's first and second party output in 2020 was its digital initiatives, because not only were there those games, but there's a lot of really great DLC this year.
Sure.
What's so?
I don't even know.
Well, here's the thing.
Not gonna lie.
It started out very well at the beginning of the year with Fire Emblem Three Houses Cindered Shadows.
Oh.
Which is not a huge expansion. It's about 10 hours worth of content, but it's really well put together, and it was a lot of fun to be back in that world. And it also then interfaces with another playthrough of the game really well, so it makes the base game fuller at the same time. And then you add into that the Pokemon DLC, which is way more ambitious than the base game. And in the case of Crown Tundra, I think actually terrific. And then you add in the Smash Brothers support, beginning with Byleth, and then moving into Fighter Pass 2, we've gotten some really great reveals and interesting characters. I think that on a digital level, it was the smaller things Nintendo did really well that impressed me the most.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and looking back on that, you are certainly right. I didn't play any of that other than trying the Smash Bros. Characters, which is more of a commentary on my personal experiences with DLC rather than the quality of those games. Because I'm surprised I didn't play Cinder Shadows. I'm surprised I didn't get into either of the Pokemon DLCs. But of course, I enjoyed the Smash Bros. Characters. But even comparing these DLC initiatives to what we've had in the past with Breath of the Wild expansion packs, Torna, Octopath, or not, Octo expansion.
Yes.
These are, and Smash is sort of a continuing thing, so it's sort of in its own bubble. But I think just Pokemon and Fire Emblem, while they're fine, are just on par with what we've had DLC initiatives in the past. So I wouldn't say that necessarily pushes this year in any particular direction.
I don't think it pushes the year in any particular direction, but I think it was the highlight.
Sure.
And I do think that Cindered Shadows and especially Crown Tundra are on par in terms of quality with some of those other DLC things. Nothing's ever going to top the Octo expansion, which I think is really lovely. And I hope we get a full Splatoon game with a single player campaign of that quality.
Yeah.
But I just think it's worth noting what they did in terms of DLC this year. And I also have to say that the things like Good Job and Kirby Fighters 2 make me hopeful that Nintendo will return to a 3DS era of releasing smaller downloadable titles more frequently.
Sure.
Because I think some really creative and fun things came out of that era of design and allows teams to experiment with smaller stuff. Another one this year was a port, but Part-Time UFO was also fun and really feels at home on Switch. So
was Box Boy and Box Girl this year?
Box Boy Box Girl was a 2019 title.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
that's
exactly why I didn't connect with me.
Yeah. But I think
I actually have that on my list for 2019.
Well, there we go.
Okay.
I think it's important to think about, strangely, the fact that I think it was third-party content that might have actually carried the Switch's year in 2020.
Sure.
How do you feel about that supposition that I've just made?
I honestly don't know what that word means.
I don't think I used it properly.
Yeah, how Howard was using that sentence. Give me a fucking real man word.
What do you think of the idea that it was third-party content that really made Nintendo's 2020 special?
I think it is certainly true, especially as you focus more on the partner showcases, which were the best hype things from this year, especially as they improved. As we said, Monster Hunter, Ori, Control, these games that we were watching live and surprised that they came out.
Yeah.
I don't think I bought any third-party games on Switch this year. Because a lot of those games are things that I've already played. Doesn't disparage the quality being put on Nintendo's platforms and how it boosted the gear, but I don't think for either of us that third-party content really connected on a personal level.
Well, au contraire, she's another phrase I might be using a little bit improperly.
No, that's proper, yeah.
So I was in a more interesting position to talk about this because when I was writing for Nintendo, we were doing a lot of coverage of all things Switch, of course, believe it or not, at a Nintendo website. But I found myself paying a little bit closer attention to third-party stuff then, and I think that 2K titles that they brought over.
Oh yeah, that was at the beginning of the year, wasn't it?
That was
it was
May. It was announced in March, released about in May. So having those games were really special. BioShock runs really well. Apparently Borderlands runs really well. I just received XCOM for my birthday, so I'm excited to play that. It's important to remember that for a lot of Nintendo's audience, these games are brand new to them. Sure. And I think that colors the year in a really unique way.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of legacy content that came over in the sense that we got Devil May Cry 3 special, which is a enhanced and new version of that game. We got the original Doom titles. We got No More Heroes 1 and 2.
Yep.
And then we got bigger things like the Outer Worlds. And while it took a while to get a graphical patch that makes the game look better, for me, that was how I first experienced that game, and that was really awesome to play, and it showed me why this form factor is really excellent for Western development, even though it's not happening too often. At the same time, Doom Eternal came out this year on Switch, and while it was late, 3 of the 6 games nominated for Game of the Year are playable on Switch, and they released in 2020. The other, of course, being Hades, which speaks to the strength of indies on Switch this year, especially things like Hades.
Yeah. I'm currently digging through a few websites trying to refresh myself on what exactly I played this year, to be honest, because it's been been a long year, believe it or not. Fucking
Believe it or
2020
not.
has been certainly interesting. But
Yeah.
I do think that the indie content for me probably actually was the strongest suit. I probably played more indie games on Switch than I did any other, category of games.
Yeah.
A Short Hike, we both loved. Superliminal. I
Mm-hmm.
played Sayonara Wild Hearts for the first time this year, but I don't think that was
That's
released
a
this year.
2019 game.
Hades, I played on PC, but it came out on Switch. Is still console exclusive
on Switch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Blood Roots, I think, was the beginning of this year. I played that. And now Among Us just came out. Another big one. And then two ones that we reviewed: They Bleed Pixels and Gunner 2. Don't do much for me, but I do think there's a lot here. Maybe some of these indie games that I'm forgetting also came out on Switch, or ones I was a little less interested in but did hit for a larger audience. But yeah, I mean, there certainly is content this year, but I think the lack of ones that A, got me hyped, and B, I personally connected to, is what makes this honestly by far the weakest year in the Switch's life cycle for me personally.
This is, I think, the weakest year in modern Nintendo history in quite a while, even stretching back into some of the Wii U days. I think it's better than 2016 Nintendo,
Yes,
but 2015 Nintendo beats it. So it's sandwiched somewhere in the middle there.
sure.
Also, by the way, I've been just trying to drum up other things in my mind that I've been forgetting. Super Mario Maker 2 got some really excellent DLC this year.
Yeah.
Really revitalized that game for me. And I also think it's worth mentioning Nintendo's better handling of online in terms of the Nintendo Switch Online membership, giving some really interesting NES and SNES games. We played a lot of them this year.
Sure.
And I think having the DKC games re-released again, which was great, having some more obscure games come over, some Japanese exclusive ones be brought. There was a lot
Super
of
Picross, let's fucking go. That's my secondary release of the year. Let's be fucking real.
Yeah. So there was content, but this year wasn't headlined by anything other than Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
And it's just so weird looking at 2019 it was off to a slow beginning, but when 2019 got rolling, it was
end of that year. Yeah.
After title after title after title. 2018 was really barren for a while, but then Super Mario Maker, Let's Go, and then especially Smash Ultimate is a 3-hit combo that was really, really something special. And of course, 2017 was 2017.
Yeah.
2020 just really felt muddled. It felt like a mess. It felt like Nintendo didn't even know what they were doing. And that's never a good sign, I don't think.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Super Mario Maker 2 is 2019, actually.
It's 2019, but the DLC, it was the world building update.
This year. No, I know, but you said you referred to Mario Maker when you were talking about 2018,
yes.
and I'm like, that didn't sound right to me because it's not.
Wait, no, I said Super Mario Party, unless it's a Mario Maker, and I'm fucking
You did,
dumb.
yes, you said Super Mario Maker, but yes, Super Mario Party. Yeah, I mean,
Mario Party.
I think the reason that I'm mostly down on this year is not because it was technically bad in terms of the things that came out, and I certainly played some things that I enjoyed, but it did lack the momentum and hype that I was so used to through the rest of the Switch's life cycle. I was the fucking guy on Reddit with paragraphs of why the Switch was so great. I still have some of those comments. I think they're fucking hilarious. But because I was so invested in the announcement cycle of the Switch and saying, hey, look at all the stuff that's coming and all of these big franchises that are getting announcements and these third-party software that's never been on Nintendo before is now coming. And that naturally has died down as it becomes more normalized. Something like Ori and Control and No More Heroes, these are games that are like, okay, yeah, cool, they're on Switch, but it's not like, holy shit, Switch is getting third-party games like it was at the beginning. But I mean, even so, I can look back at each of these years, 17 through 19, and say there are a solid lineup of headline games those years that carry the year and say this is why the Switch is worth it. And of course, those games are still on Switch. There are reasons why you should buy a Switch, but 2020 was weaker in those larger releases. Animal Crossing, of course, is what pushed everything. It pushed the fucking industry this year. But Paper Mario Clubhouse games and Age of Calamity are mid-tier releases in comparison to even some of the relatively smaller releases we got in past years, like a Luigi's Mansion 3 or something like Octopath or Astral Chain, that were sort of those third-party big things. So I don't know. 2020, interesting, but overall a disappointment in my eyes.
Of course, you said something I think is important in terms of Animal Crossing carrying the year. Nintendo was obscenely profitable in 2020,
Yes.
which is such an interesting fact to have in the background of this discussion.
Yeah, of course.
Like the sales numbers Nintendo was putting up this year are absolutely glasses removing.
Yeah.
It's impossible to discuss Nintendo's 2020 without talking about the fact that they just absolutely shredded sales charts.
Yeah. There
Which,
is a tweet fucking back and forth from late 2019 or the beginning of this year, in which you and I are talking about Switch's sales numbers, and you say it'll be pretty lucky if it reaches, like, so you said, like something like 55 million by the end of its life cycle, and
yes,
it has already smashed that in 2020. And I think that was your misprojection of the Switch's sales, because I don't think you were aware of the current sale number at the time, but also B, just the strength of what this year did, the pandemic pushing video game sales so hard. This is fucking wild.
It's absolutely wild. The Switch at every turn has surpassed my expectations. Pre-release, I was very skeptical.
Yeah.
I thought that the Switch would top out around maybe 30, 40 million, and what it would be is a make good in a stepping stone to Nintendo reaching the sort of success they're seeing with the Switch now.
Yeah.
But the fact that they jumped to this, again, I was like, in 2019, I was like, 50 million seems pretty good. And then a couple weeks ago, I was like, why the fuck is Tucker responding to this tweet that I made a year ago saying the Switch has sold 68 million systems? But it's just a testament to how that number continues to grow, which is just fucking wild. But like you said, I think this year is disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
I would need to consider it more, but I would think that in a lot of respects it's a bad year.
Sure.
I don't think on the whole 2020 was a bad year for Nintendo, but in a lot of respects it was. And unless you want to say more about the year itself, I thought maybe we could end by looking forward just a little bit.
Sure. And I think just a little bit is the key word there, because we don't know what's fucking happening. There's a handful of them. There's a handful of titles that are in development, but we don't have a lot of confirmed stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to do a predictions video at some point. We talked about it a little bit in our discussion about what Nintendo will do in March. But I think there is a reason to be hopeful for Nintendo's 2021.
Yeah.
Already, things like Shin Megami Tensei 5, No More Heroes 3, Bravely Default 2, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury.
Yep.
There are whether these titles speak to us or not is one thing, but there is already a compelling little nest egg of software being built up there, and that will of course expand. I mean, there have been a 2D Metroid in the ether. I'm gonna fucking probably die. The day that gets announced will be the last day I spend living on this planet. But there is a lot of content that I think could happen, could release, and I really don't see a year when there are the anniversaries for Zelda, Metroid, Pokemon, and Donkey Kong, where Nintendo does not have a much more exciting and robust lineup of software. And if I'm wrong, God fucking help everybody.
No, I mean, I definitely agree. I also want to mention the next year is also the Kid Icarus anniversary. Doesn't know if that means anything, but Kid Icarus released very close to Metroid, so those two are sort of hand in hand.
Same year.
Yeah.
So 35 for both.
Yes. But I certainly agree. And I think that the downness, I don't give a shit if that's a word or not, of this year could lead to next year being a little more content rich, as things were delayed or not talked about or not announced and will be starting next year. I think that Nintendo probably does want to do sort of a refresh in March, rather that be in an overly aggressive way or just in a marketing way, where they're going to start announcing a lot more stuff and getting people more reinvested in the new content, because this year was so light on it. But I agree on the front of those, the anniversaries will carry it essentially on its own, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's a lot of games that I'm excited to possibly have re-releases of if Nintendo decides to go that route. New games in those series, if they come out, that I mean, that's already a lineup that would make a killer year. And there's other things in the fucking back burner. I mean, we've got a Breath of the Wild sequel announced that is coming soon. That could be next year. We have Bayonetta 3 that has had fucking mum's word said of it for almost 2.5 years now or more. And there's other studios working on stuff. We're certainly going to see things we're not even thinking of that are going to come out next year. And I think that's very exciting. And I think the fact that this year was a little bit lighter on Nintendo allowed me to expand my excitement of the games industry, both towards other companies, namely Sony with a lot of those games, but retro games, I was able to catch up on a lot of stuff. So I'm not disappointed in 2020 as a video game player, but I certainly am from the perspective of a Nintendo fan.
I agree with that completely, and I think that the strength of specifically Sony and PlayStation's year makes Nintendo's year look even weaker by comparison.
Oh yes,
which we will talk about when we get to that review. But I think that's a good place to leave it.
I agree.
On a little bit more of an optimistic note, because if 2020 for Nintendo was anything, it was surprising. In fact, they were able to surprise us and pull first-party titles out of thin air. Has me hopeful that in 2021 the same can happen, but only time will tell. And let me tell you right now, I heard from Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto himself that every like on this video will directly translate into added development resources for new 2021 titles.
Wow.
So if Nintendo has a poor year,
it's your fault, guys.
It will be your fault.
Yeah, it's true.
And if you subscribe, Mr. Miyamoto said he'd have something special in store for us all.
It's true. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. We have a lot of other content planned. And,
no, we don't. Goodbye.
I don't understand how you live how your life. But I'm excited to do the Sony one because this one was a lot better than I thought it would be. Which is not a commentary on it, but I just was like, oh, I wonder if this is gonna be interesting because I didn't do my research, but we was able to do it.
Of course we was able to do it. I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. People keep wishing me happy birthday.
I wish they'd stop. David Wise did Donkey Kong Country. He did Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Grant Kirkhope is Banjo. Yes. Okay. I get them mixed up.
Grant Kirkhope did the music for Cool Spot.
No, I think you're thinking of Schindler's List.
Cool Spot is a Schindler's List of NES games.
Schindler's List is the Dark Souls of movies.